I am aware of the fact that some of you, but I hope not many, are coming to hear me lay out a huge revelation about where NIHR is going and whether you're going to be funded. If that's the case, you've had a wasted trip. This is very much a celebration of the last 10 years of NIHR, of the extraordinary organisation that Sally, Russell and so many of you have created, with many, many different elements to it, which even 6 months into this job, I'm still discovering new things that NIHR does for the health of the UK. It is quite extraordinary, the reach that this organisation has, that they have created, and that all of you have created. So this is very much about building on the 10 remarkable years that have led us to this point in time. I'm just going to start off just laying out, I'm only going to make 3 points at this stage. At some future stage I may lay out a much longer way my view about where the NIHR might wish to go, but I wish to do that after I've had the chance to talk to all of you and many not in the room, because this is a shared endeavour, and this is very much what Sally and Russell have put together, is a shared endeavour between all of us, where all of us share a vision. This is not the vision of one person or one small group of people. The first should not need saying to this audience, but I think it's worth it. This is the first time I've talked to some of you, in a sense putting one slide of my stump speech to the flinty-hearted people of Treasury and similarly about why this is so important. Because all of us know this is incredibly important to the future of the NHS. I think sometimes that is not so fully realised outside. The second is to make the point that the great majority of serious health interventions which will benefit the UK in the future will come from multiple disciplines. Virtually no serious health change historically has come from a single discipline. None have come from a single study. And finally, just to invite you to take part with us in a serious forward look as to what the UK's problems will be. Because it is our responsibility collectively to project forward where the health in the UK is heading, where a good outcome would be, where a bad outcome would be, and for us to do the research that allows us to move from the bad to the good. Oh, sorry, I hadn't realised that slide is up there. The reason I put this slide up was this. I did want to highlight in particular this very nice front page of The Lancet from this week, which says the NHS has benefited enormously from the National Institute for Health Research and its approach to clinical research in the last 10 years. And that is what this meeting is about, but also adds, importantly, its need for the NIHR will be even greater in the future. Now let me start off, because I think you should never look forward until you've looked backwards. Let me start off presenting the importance of research in the different way to the way Sally did. Sally highlighted some really important trials that have happened, individual pieces of research which will be transformative over the next few years. So I'm going to put it a slightly different way and to look back at some of the extraordinary improvements in health that have happened over the last 40 years and in particular over the last 10 years of NIHR's existence. And the point about this, and the line I would like you to concentrate on, is the top two lines. The dark blue one is men, and the red one is women who have cardiovascular disease, and this is age-standardized mortality. This, if you look at this, is absolutely astonishing. And for those of you who are medically qualified or clinically qualified, you will remember seeing heart attacks, the vast majority, and cardiac failure, the vast majority of an average medical take. Look at it now and it is transformed. This transformation is built on science and is built on multiple sciences from virtually every discipline. So just take a few examples. The extraordinary epidemiological work of Doll and Pito, which led to the link with smoking being detected, and then the public health interventions that went with that. The pharmacological and basic science work that went to the discovery of and then development of ACE inhibitors and beta blockers. The big trials work. One of the things that first brought me into research was reading the ISIS papers and seeing you could get around a 20% mortality improvement just from taking a single aspirin, something which costs pence and had been sitting in people's cupboards for many years. So look at this change and you see enormous range of medical advances and public health advances. You also are seeing enormous advances in surgery and in radiological techniques. A lot of this, particularly in stroke, for example, depends on advances in MRI and CT work. A lot of this would depend on things like angioplasty and various forms of coronary bypass surgery. So the range of sciences that have gone into this is enormous, and NIHR covers all of them. Additionally, if you think about where they came from, some of them are publicly funded, some of them came from companies developing things, and some came from the charity sector. And one of the things that is most remarkable about NIHR as a structure is it allows people from all three of those groups to use the NIHR to develop science. And if you look at historically at the big advances in science that have happened, they've always come from multiple disciplines. If you then go to the dashed line in the middle, what we have is cancer. Age, standardized mortality, remarkably flat actually over that period. But what all of us think is if you look forward 20 years, we will see a completely changed landscape for cancer over the next few decades, based on the kind of research that many people in this audience here have undertaken and are undertaking with NIHR funding. And then finally, the tiny dotted line on the left, infectious diseases. Gone but not forgotten, and a combination of antimicrobial resistance, which Sally has highlighted so effectively to the world, and an aging population means this is a problem that is going to resurge over the next few decades. We need to be ready for that. Now, moving on to the last 10 years, this slide shows the change in mortality, and I've chosen women in Sally's honour. I could have chosen men, over the 10 years that roughly corresponds to the NIHR's existence. Now, most of these changes, of course, are research that predates NIHR, because research is a fundamentally forward-looking activity. So the work that NIHR has done in the last 10 years will have its payoff in the next 20, 30, 40 years. But this is just to show how much, even in 10 years, health in the UK has changed and is changing. And I would like to highlight a few points with this. The first one is that the change that's happened has led to a significant reduction, for example, in cardiovascular disease, as shown in the last slide. But because of that, other causes of morbidity and mortality are increasing proportionately, and the one that really stands out here is dementia. This is not because dementia is going up in an absolute sense. And in fact, if you look at Carol Brain's fantastic work that came out a couple of weeks ago, what that shows that in men at least, dementia has in fact decreased, age standardized, but because other things are reducing, this is going up as a proportion. So some of the change is because things are going so well that problems that previously were not an issue start to be an issue, and some of them are new problems like antimicrobial resistance, which we need to respond to. So we must respond to things getting better, we must respond to things getting worse, and we must respond to the fact that because some things get better, other things are proportionally going to become more important as time goes on. The final point I'd like to make on this slide is it's very easy to only obsess about the 10 things on the top of the list. And these are really important, and if NIHR was not spending a lot of its money and effort in addressing these, we would be failing in our job. But at the same time, I'm enormously proud of the fact that I've inherited the Rare Diseases Network, for example, where it's very possible that the transformational effects of NIHR will be felt first in relatively small diseases where the science is going to unlock enormous changes in the future. Now, when we're thinking about the UK, I would think it's important for us to remember that health is not evenly distributed across the UK. And it is not evenly distributed across the UK depending on what disease you have. I've highlighted 2 on maps here, and I'll mention a third. The first on the left is dementia in women. I regret to say that the Minister for Life Sciences constituency has a very large number of people who are demented compared to others. I'm sure I don't want to draw a correlation, I'm just stating that as a fact. But if you look, for example, at heart disease, then you get a rather different pattern across the UK. And I think we have to be mindful, because the NIHR is the research institute for the NHS, of where the burden of disease is. But burden, of course, is not just about geography. It's also about age group, it's about socioeconomic status, And it's about things like ethnicity. So, for example, the third example, if we were looking at sickle cell disease, which Dame Sally herself did pioneering work on, we'd be looking at a map which was concentrated almost exclusively within the M25. So depending on what the problem is, the burden in the UK will vary quite considerably. But looking forward, this is predictably going to change. And what I have here is ONS projections from the time that I qualified fully as a house officer, roughly now, and roughly when I'm due to retire if I live that long. And what you can see over that time is not just that the population is aging. Everybody knows the population is aging. But because cities export age and import youth, they maintain a very stable demographic profile over this time, and other bits of the UK, in particular, rural bits, which are difficult to provide services, will age a great deal quicker. And I think we need to think about this when we're forward-looking about how we provide services in the future. I'm just using this as an example. With the aging as well will come a real shift towards multiple morbidity. So if you look back 20 years, a very large number of people would have a disease or a disease clustered around a single risk factor like smoking for decades before they got multiple other diseases in older age. Now what people are moving is transitioning from a situation where they have very minimal morbidity, often controlled by medicine, into one where they have multiple diseases in extraordinarily short order. And our current model, which is based on essentially single disease guidelines, where you make the diagnosis and then follow the protocol, is going to become increasingly difficult, I think, to sustain realistically as the population becomes older. And medical training, I think, has not yet caught up with this reality. This is also going to provide us with some substantial healthcare delivery challenges, which for researchers, as researchers, we have to address. In many of these areas, for example, a 2-hour ambulance ride to a stroke unit is going to be difficult to achieve. Now, moving on to the NIHR very specifically, this is just highlighting the relative spend between the UK government's two major vehicles for funding health research, the Medical Research Council and NIHR. Now, it is very much to acknowledge that other research councils do important research that's relevant to health, like ESRC, and that there are enormously important funders in the charity sector, people like the Wellcome Trust, foundations, and also in private industry. But for NIHR, which is what we're celebrating today, this is the balance of funding. And what you can see is that MRC funding, unsurprisingly, is heavily skewed towards the most fundamental sciences, which is its duty to do that. NIHR covers the entire range from translational research all the way through to the most applied sciences, all of which will be needed for the health of the UK 20 to 30 years out. Now, this isn't the first point I'm going to make, which is in any sense, I think, contentious, and it's not very contentious. I think it is an absolute belief of everyone in this room that we should fund the best research in England where the best research exists. That is a fundamental belief. However, if you look at the map of where NIHR funds, which very much mirrors where the best research measured by global standards is, we have to accept it doesn't exactly mirror the worst diseases in the UK. And we need to marry those two up because we do not want to move back from the situation that the best people should be funded, but we also need to make sure that the populations in greatest need have their needs addressed. And it seems to me that there are at least two things that in NIHR we could think quite profoundly about, one of which is making a serious attempt to make sure that the best people in the UK, wherever they are, whether it's Penzance or Newcastle, are doing the research not only where they are, but where their population base is for the more applied sciences. So basic sciences, you could do all of it in Penzance. If it's in a laboratory, it sort of doesn't matter. But the more you become applied, the more you seriously have to link things up. And coming from an area of global health where it was completely normal for people to travel 14 hours in a plane to do a study because that's where the disease is, the fact that a 2-hour train journey seems quite a stretch in England is something I think we need to be slightly cautious about. And I think that the NIHR already has one fantastic vehicle for allowing this to happen, which is the clinical research networks. And I think building on what they have and the infrastructure they have, which can be used by all people, publicly funded charity sector and also companies is going to be very important to make sure that the research we do, particularly the applied research we do, is completely relevant to the future of the NHS. Of course, if you talk about the future, you have to think about training. And when it comes to training, I think I wanted just to make 3 points, all of which I think are probably uncontentious, but I think need making anyway. The first is that the science and the healthcare system into which the people who are starting training now will end up as independent researchers look completely different from the science and research needs there are at this point in time. We must think forward to what the future challenges will be, so we are training people for future need. And if I could highlight 2 areas where, for example, I think the UK is relatively weak. It is surprisingly difficult to get people to do serious research in very elderly people. There isn't a strong tradition of that, and yet it is obvious that that is where a very serious amount of the work is going to be needed. And we have, I think, relatively under-resourced research in the social sciences, both the qualitative research, social sciences, and the economic sciences, which are going to be essential if we are to maintain a viable health service free at the point of care for all that provides world-class care into the future. So these are the kinds of things we need to be thinking about, and also saying, should we be giving all scientists, for example, training in big data, because they will all need this irrespective of what kind of research discipline they come from. We need to be realistic about the fact that clinical researchers now are facing very different pressures, including financial pressures, to those that were faced by many of the more grizzled members of the audience when they started their research career. And I think we have to be really serious, building on the work that happened as a result of the Athena Swan, and looking at where the fall off in women is. Women are, after all, over 50% of the scientific workforce at the beginning of most scientific careers, and for most areas, the fall-off tends to be around the postdoctoral area. And we need to look at the reasons for that and ways that we can address it systematically. So my final point is really just to return to the beginning. NIHR, under Sally Russell's and everyone here's leadership, has transformed the research space in the UK. In addition to looking at where the new challenges will be from a health point of view, we also need to look at where the new opportunities will be from new sciences, from genomics, from immunology, from big data. The list is extremely long. Not all of them will do everything which their greatest advocates claim they will. That's all right. They will do it. It'll just probably take rather longer time than the real enthusiasts think it will do. But a combination of looking forward to predictable changes in need and looking forward to predictable opportunities in science, I think if we do this collectively, we can build on the fantastic success that NIHR in its current state is. Thank you very much.